Hello and welcome to Petro Media. I'm your host, Terrence Anderson, and today we're going to talk about our obsession with analog. Now, today's the first day without the kids for the summer. They've all been dropped off to school, so I'm excited to get to work on things with production. And I had a thought, why are we so obsessed with analog sound? And I think it has to do with a couple of things. For starters, digital sound sounds sterile to us. And I think it's not so much that it's bad, it's just that it's really, really clean. And this is because digital sound tends to not have imperfections in it in the way that we think. Digital recording tends to be very clinical in the way that it does things. We notice that. The hardware of today is very good at capturing a very clean sound. There's almost no noise in the cables, no noise in the microphones, no noise in the equipment itself, because all the components have gotten so good that it's very easy to keep it clean. But the funny thing about it is we all actually liked the noises that we heard in the products, and we didn't even realize it till everything was clean. That sterility of the sound, I guess, is something that impacts us. We feel it, and we're just like, this doesn't sound right. And we're going to get to another reason why that is at the end. Another reason why we prefer analog sound, I think, is because we like the way the harmonics interact with one another. And the harmonics are almost like the unheard of things, the magic that you don't hear directly, you feel or sonically hear it in the background of things. You can tune harmonics to affect other parts of the sound in a recording. Naturally, analog things tend to do that. When you have tape saturation, when you have the console that has some warmth to it. Many of you have never actually used hardware consoles, like the old school ones, the SSL, the Neve, and all these different things. But one of the things you don't know about those consoles is you couldn't turn them off. Once you turned them on, you had to keep them on for pretty much all of the usage. And then when you're done recording, most recording studios never turned them off. And the reason why they never turned them off was because, for starters, it wasn't good for the equipment to actually be turned on and off, on and off, on and off. That's actually a bad thing, because what's happening is the hardware is warming up and then cooling down, warming up and then cooling down. And eventually that starts to cause damage with the actual components. So the easier solution was to just never turn it off. Many studios would actually have backup power supplies that would keep the hardware on. And in the case of an emergency, if the power clipped and they didn't have a choice but to turn things off, they would slowly turn things off in a manner that would allow them to power things down without doing damage to the hardware. That's one of the reasons why that actually was like that. And some of that warmth would actually keep things a certain way. There's a plugin that I use for a Neve emulation from a company called Boostech. It's the Model Channel N, I believe it's called. And it has a knob on there that goes from new to old because it's emulating that behavior. That actually segues into my next point. Plugins these days are good at creating the harmonic distortion and saturation that we're looking for in the sound of these devices. So you don't necessarily need to use an old device unless you truly know how it works to get that sound, because a lot of these plugins nowadays are very good at adding in their version of saturation and harmonics that create that feel that you're looking for. And it's kind of good because this allows for recallability. Like back in the day, it was really hard to recall the exact same experience every single time. In many cases, you'd work in the studio, and when you were done with it for the day, because you didn't want to lose any settings, people would take pictures of the settings, try to recall it, but most of the time they would put a sign on the desk, and that sign quite literally said, "Don't touch the settings, otherwise I will kick your when I get back to the studio. Do not touch this console. Don't ever touch this console." There was a lot of that type of language because you couldn't reset these things. But today you can recall it because plugins are very good at recalling the exact settings that we need. Knowing this information, recreating the sonic palette, as long as you have an understanding of what you're looking for and how it's supposed to sound, you can definitely create it with plugins. But those harmonics in your sound, that analog feel, that is something that really catches all of our attention. There are quite a few brands on the market today that are making plugins that emulate these behaviors. I'm just going to point out some manufacturers: UAD, Plugin Alliance, Waves to some extent. Some of their plugins are actually still pretty good. And some of the manufacturers themselves, like SSL, are recreating emulations of their original consoles, and they sound great. I'm a huge SSL console fan when it comes to mixing, and I'm a Neve fan when it comes to processing. So I love to track the sound in with Neve sounds and mix things down with the SSL. This has always been my favorite workflow, and it works best for me. It'd be interesting to hear what works best for you. And the last point that I'll make about this is we are not perfect. Human beings are not perfect at all. We have to remember that. And because of our imperfections, I think we prefer to hear things that have imperfections. When we hear things that sound too perfect, too sterile, we tend to, shy away from it. Like, this doesn't sound right. But when you hear something that does have imperfections in the sound, all of a sudden we start to perk up our ears and feel interested in it. It's a really weird concept that I'm thinking of. Think about the way vinyl recordings were back in the day. Today, vinyl recordings are a lot better, but in the past, they had to roll off some of the high end and roll off some of the low end in order to make the recording work, simply because if they recorded all the way down to 20 hertz, the needle would skip because the recording would actually jump from one groove to another, and that would damage the vinyl. So there were already things being sheared off in the recordings. When tape recorded things, there were certain frequencies it didn't record well. So there was also that. Plus, tape naturally caused a compression factor to happen. So again, you start to lose certain frequencies in that process. All of these things created the warmth that we like in the sound. And another thing we really don't talk about, like everybody talks about, the old MPCs sound better than the new MPCs. Oh, you want to get that sound that all these guys had, like Just Blaze and yada, yada, yada. But we forget that in order for them to get that sound in the first place, they actually ran the audio through external outboard gear before tracking it into the MPC in the first place. Sure, there are some people who didn't do that, recording things into the MPC, but if you had the opportunity to do that, you would absolutely do that. You would process the audio before you sent it into the MPC. And that's something that I recommend to a lot of people. When you're recording something into your One Plus, your Live, your XSE, any of the new machines, I always recommend process the audio on the way in, whether that's you doing it externally or using some of the Akai plugins inside of the MPC on the input to just process things a certain way before you actually get it into it as a sample and then chop up what you've processed. You will hear a huge difference in your sound doing that. And then on the way out, when they're recording stuff out of the device, they ran it through signal chains to process it into the console and onto tape or into Pro Tools or wherever they're capturing the audio. It wasn't simply just the machine. Sure, the converters on the machine did a great job of helping you to process and record things at a higher level so that you can have some of that harmonic distortion going into the sound. But we know converters today aren't designed to work that way. So the easier solution is to process the audio on the way in, add some of that flavor that you really want, and then on the way out, if you can do it. But if you have already done it on the way in, you might not necessarily need to do it on the way out. So that's something to take into consideration, especially if you plan to mix it in another software and you have no intention of using the MPC3 software to do your mixes and then mastering. Lately, I've been actually mixing in the MPC One Plus on purpose because I wanted to make sure I have an understanding of how to do it if I need to do it, which I now have a better understanding of, and then mastering in either Luna or Logic Pro. But it's not like I can't take those stems out of the One Plus and then do the same thing and mix it down in Logic Pro, which is also one of my favorite things to do as well. So that's what my thoughts are. What are your thoughts on the subject? I just want to do a quick video on this. And, you know, I look forward to hearing everybody's input on that. And maybe I'll do a few more of these car chats about products. Let me know what you guys think on that. In the event, like, share, and subscribe, and join me next time.